committee meeting. My name is Joe Calvo. I'm the committee chair. To my right is Mr. Visconti, Councilman Visconti, and to my left is Councilman Seabury, and to his left is Mayor Mark Boughton. We have with us tonight ex officio members of the council, Dwayne Perkins, Councilwoman Nancy DiMichi. We have Councilman Don Taylor, Councilman Ben Chianese, Councilman Rotello, Councilman Curran. We have our Corporation Counsel, Laszlo Pinter, here. He was here. Oh, there he is. And we have Director of Finance, David St-Hilaire. And we have Dennis Elford, our planning director. Welcome, Mr. Elford. We have the Friends of Lee Farm here as well. Mrs. Rotello just was gracious enough to introduce some of the key members of the group, and we're ready to go. Folks, what I thought we would do tonight is we're going to hear from council members and council members ex officio. We understand the request from Lee Farm, the Friends of Lee Farm, and we understand that's the charge, that we're to try to figure out a way to see if we can do something with some of the property at Lee Farms. And what I'd like to do, since the mayor has had the most contact with Lee Robinson, that he would give us a brief description of some of his discussions. I know that some of it has not gone as we would like to have seen it gone, especially in regards to the U.S. Army. And I know that probably most of you have seen the press releases in the newspapers and print and online about the wishes of some discussion with the Army and some public hearings, and to this date we've sort of been denied that. But there were some good changes last week with the announcement from Congressman Murphy that he has met with the Army and they have agreed to look elsewhere. I don't believe that they are entirely giving up on the Lee Farm property. I think they are agreeing to look elsewhere now. I'm hoping that that is something they truly want to do and something that they're not just saying to us. But I'm going to let the mayor take it from here and sort of just give a description of what's going on and where we are and where we are to today.
Thank you. Well, first of all, appreciate everybody coming out on a very cold night tonight, and appreciate having your interest and your time here. Just to give you a kind of an update on really the much larger issue, which all kind of is hooked in, if you will, because there's a lot of tentacles to this whole thing. As you read last week, the Army has agreed to try to find other locations other than Lee Farm. That's a nice thing, but the problem is you're coming in at the very tail end of the process. This is something that should have happened, 2 years ago versus happening now. So what that means is that the time frame that they've given us to be able to scout a location out, determine a price, determine you have a willing seller, determine it meets all of their requirements for utilities, wetlands, all the things that go with that. It's extremely tight, and it's almost a near, frankly, impossible task. And I'm not quite sure if their goal is sort of just to say, well, we asked you and you couldn't come up with another space, or how serious they are. And they've been very unclear to say, well, what happens if we don't find an alternate location in Danbury? Does that mean that they go back out, look up and down the 84 corridor? Or do they only set on Danbury? So they've been sort of unclear as to what the next steps are beyond this. But we are feverishly working to trying to provide alternate locations, contacting property owners to see if there's interest in even selling, those kinds of things. Right now, we're going to provide a list of potential other sites for the Army to see if they're interested in scouting those out and making, trying to move the site. So that's our number one battle. Now, the much other part of it, so that kind of gives you up to date where we are with that. The Army might be down as early as Thursday to look at these sites. We really want to be with them, because what happens is they're very dismissive. They'll say, nope, that don't work. Nope, that road's not right. And we say, well, you can change the road a little bit, or you can add this utility line. They're very sort of flippant about the way they're evaluating properties. We like to be there and understand why a particular property is not important to them. That's not necessarily clear whether or not they're going to have us be part of that process. So that's kind of there. And by the way, there are alternate locations outside of Danbury. Just to be clear, there's a very strong candidate that's not in Danbury, in another town. Our position, of the administration has been, I can't speak for the council people here, is that, look, we like to accommodate the Army Reserve. We're just as patriotic as the next person. I'm a veteran, former reservist. I want the Army in Danbury, but we have to be careful about how we site such a large facility and where we site that facility, and it's got to make sense for the community. I have some other reservations that aren't really tied to this, but the facility itself doesn't generate any property taxes. So there's no taxes, there's no pilot money, payment in lieu of taxes. You get no grants that you get for hosting the facility, you get nothing. There's also no zoning regulations, even their environmental regulations. We understood that they had to go through our EIC commission. That's not true. They will apply as a courtesy, but if they think it's going to take too long, they're going to pull out and not necessarily listen to what our EIC commission thinks. And they don't pay any permit fees. So building this size would generate a significant amount of permit fees, and all that's free. And the problem for us is when you look at it. The problem for us when you look at a site like Lee Farm, we'll talk about this in a minute, it's certainly problematic in terms of both the siting, in terms of the monetary and fiscal impact. Okay. Having said that, will we bite that bullet somewhere else because it's good for the community? Sure. If we can find a spot that works, we'll do that. So in terms of Lee Farm, where are we on that? Well, first of all, Lee Farm is over, for those who don't know, is over 300 acres. I've ordered an appraisal of the entire parcel so we understand the scope of dollars we're talking about. But I can tell you a ballpark estimate for that entire parcel is probably in the $40 to $50 million price range. That is clearly completely unacceptable for us to be able to meet that kind of number. We just don't have that money. We couldn't carry that debt service and that debt load. And frankly, when we have greater needs within our schools, needs within our public safety departments, I think it's going to be a problem for us to go and just purchase a property. So if you think we're going to write a check for that, I can't recommend that. However, some of the discussions I've had with Mr. Robinson over the years, and obviously he has to be here and be part of this to help us a little bit, would be to leverage some of the development with some open space, possibly a donation and a purchase by the city with some of our remaining open space funds, which is, David, I think it's a couple of $1 million in there that's left over. That'll get you about 30 or 40 acres based on his price per square acre spot. Actually, a very steeply sloped property. You wouldn't get anything buildable for that because he's getting far above that for the Lee Farm site. So could you maybe pick up a piece that's contiguous, say, with Terrawau and add to that inventory? Sure. Personally, I like to buy Fry's Corner just because I think it's a really neat piece of property to own and could serve the community a lot of good. Are you going to lose some of the meadows? Yep. Are you going to lose other parts of the property to development? Yeah. I mean, we just can't afford to buy the whole thing. The second part, but where the issue becomes is that Mr. Robinson, and he has a number of different plans that he's proposed over the years, and the city has not given their affirmation saying, yes, we like this plan, or no, we don't like this plan because I don't believe that's my duty to do that. That's what we have our boards and commissions to do, right? To make decisions based on our plan of development and other things. His sort of feeling is, look, if I could get a rezone over here from industrial to, say, residential, it would help me get the highest, best use out of my property, and I would be willing to sell some to the city and maybe donate some to the city, but I need to get a certain amount of development out of there to maximize his dollar value, and he's got heirs that he has to share that money with. So my concern has been that I don't necessarily feel comfortable with a straight quid pro quo sort of agreement. In other words, we'll give you a rezone for this land, but you sell us this land. I mean, it's kind of weird that we would do that. My response has always been, look, go apply to the commission for rezone. If you get it, that's what elected officials do, great. If you don't get it, I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do about it. I don't like linking those two transactions together, and I've explained it to him on a number of occasions. That's kind of where we're at. He is not, at this point, what I would consider to be a willing property seller. He is, in terms of playing with us for the prices that we want. And so we're going to have to get some movement out of him on these numbers to even be able to tap into the open space fund to be able to acquire even a small, modest amount of land there. And it's private property. So that's kind of where we're at with this whole process. I have talked to him. He's not happy with me. because this has delayed his deal with the Army, so he's very upset with the city right now. But we left an open line of communication, and he is a gentleman when we discuss things. But he's got a certain number he wants for that property. The profit he needs to realize, it is his property. So that's kind of where we are.
Thank you very much. Taylor, then, do you have any questions?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chair, the mayor stole my thunder as usual. I sort of feel the same way that the mayor does. I don't think that we're getting a real good shake from Mr. Roberts at this point in time. However, he is still open to listening to what we have to say. Again, what the figures that the mayor threw out, $40 to $50 million, obviously we don't have that kind of money right now in this economic situation that we're in. I think that one of the things that this ad hoc committee has to do really is to explore any other way we could possibly come up and salvage whatever property we can out of the whole 330 acres. I'm a neighbor also down in the bottom of the hill, Mountville Avenue area. So I know what you people are faced with up there. You don't want to see more traffic. You don't want to see a lot of things, and I tend to agree with that. Well, I think what we have to do really is to get all the information we can from family, the Army, if at all possible. They don't want to seem to be too much in cooperative with the city, but we have to get whatever information we can and relay that information to you folks as best that we can also, and just to keep you up to date as to where we are, what the mayor is trying to do, and what can come out of this ad hoc committee in the long run. And I think that's why we're here tonight, and I certainly appreciate everybody coming out. And it's a cold night, but we're here, and we're going to stick with this thing until we get some kind of an ending one way or the other. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Seabury, before we go to ex officio members?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Question for Mr. Fountain here. I know that you attempted to get an informational meeting from the Army that was supposed to come down. I know that you did that more than maybe 6-8 weeks now. I know that they were reluctant to come here. But is there any more movement in that direction? Are they willing to come and talk to the people of Danbury with their ideas? Are they willing to come and say, this is where we want to put this particular part of our base or any information? Are they opening any windows, any doors? Or
You want the long story or the short story?
Short story.
We got time? Well, let me just say, when this thing first really started bubbling up, I'm just going to give you a really brief history of what happened, right? The Army stopped in about 2 years ago to our planning office and said, hey, we're going to shut down the Commerce Park Center. We're going to build a new, more modern center. We need about 12 to 14 acres to site this facility. You guys got any property? So we said, well, we meaning the city, we don't have any property because they like to go to the municipality first, see if they've got, city-owned or town-owned property. But we sort of said, look, there's a bunch of places you could look here, 12 acres, 40,000 square foot building, some parking is not the end of the world. It seemed like, great, yeah, we'd love to have you here. From that initial conversation, fast forward now to this past summer, there's been very little and almost no contact, except for the, starting at the beginning of the summer of 2010. They morphed the project from 12 acres to about 30 acres. They added units from Norwalk, Naugatuck, Danbury, as well as what they call a mill center, which the mill center is a military center which will have this, more than your average active duty personnel there, right? A typical reserve center is empty, 2 people, admin people during the week. Ben's a National Guardsman, so he knows. Weekends it's busy, and then that's pretty much it. Well, they're going to have a fairly decent 57, 60 employees during the week at this facility. So it's a little bit different than your typical reserve center. So the project morphed to an incredibly big project, and it went from one building at about 40,000, 50,000 square feet to multiple buildings, a campus in effect, because of the transportation unit that they brought in that requires work to be done with their trucks and all that stuff. And an extreme amount of parking. Yeah, which will accommodate, how many per acre, Dennis, cars can you accommodate? Isn't there a formula? Right, so that's about 900 cars parking for about now. A lot of that is due to repair and the fact that they move vehicles around and things like that. So that's kind of the history. So now we fast forward, they're out doing test borings on Lee Farm. I think Chris called me, Mr. Tortello called me, and some other folks called me. So I call him up. I said, the contact that we had. What's going on? The guy from what's called the Base Realignment and Closure Commission out of Massachusetts. What's going on? We hear you're out doing borings. Oh, nothing. We're just, testing some soil, whatever. Okay. So then I call Mr. Robinson. Mr. Robinson, you have Army people out on your property doing test borings. What? I didn't know that. Oh, I thought that they, I signed a letter like a year ago. I'm surprised that they just showed up to do it now. So then we started to get an inkling that there was something going on. Still thinking, though, that they only needed 12 to 14 acres. Once we heard that and things started becoming more solid and this thing started bubbling, we talked to a gentleman named Mr. Gary Perrier, who's in charge of the Base Realignment and Closure for New England. And we had a number of conversations with him, and we said, look, at some point, when you guys get serious, we need to have a public meeting, public information session. People need to know what's happening. Oh, yeah, no problem. We do that all the time, no problem. On the day of the September council meeting, when you guys were at the council, we spoke to him in the morning. My staff and myself did. Going to do that public hearing, right? Yep, no problem. Yeah, we do that, all the stuff. We're going to come out. You name it, we'll do it. Okay. We do. I tell you guys in September, we're going to have a public meeting. October comes around. They're saying now to the News Times and other folks, look, we don't have a formal request for a public meeting. Now, the reason they're saying that is that Mr. Perrier really doesn't do the actual public side of that. The Army Corps of Engineers does. That's out of Kentucky or Louisville, I think. The Army Corps doesn't talk to Mr. Perrier. Now, Mr. Perrier could have said, hey, listen, we'll do a public hearing, but we don't schedule that. You got to call this guy. Here's his number. Here's how it's done. They're all siloed off. Nobody talks to anyone. So it's kind of frustrating. So once we sort of got all that straightened out, that we were talking to the right people, the congressman wrote a letter. In that letter, he asked for a public hearing. The Army's response was, look, we're not going to give you a public meeting right now. The reason is we're going to give you time to find an alternate location. No sense getting everybody stirred up and excited if they're not going to build on that spot to begin with. So that's kind of where we stand right now in terms of the possibility of a public hearing. It's not a hearing. It's called a public information session. You're not allowed to use the word public hearing. So the answer to that is they want to wait and see if we can find an alternate location. That's a short story.
Follow up, please. Did they give you or the congressman any indication of how much time that they're going to allow you to find said?
30 days, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, that's it. And we're working hard. We're communicating with them. They will. They've said they may possibly be in town on Thursday. And again, we really strongly suggested we go with them to explain the possibilities. I'm not even sure if they're going to know what they're looking at the right address. When they go there.
Thank you. Ex officio members, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Don Taylor, Council at Large, City Council, residing Great Plain Road in Danbury, Taylor Family Farm. Just for a little background, I've worked for the Robinson family and heirs for 25 years. I've mowed the hay over there, maintained the property for a long time. Very familiar with the property. First thing I'd like to say, there's been a lot of I'm a Marine Corps veteran, come from a family of veterans. My youngest son's a veteran. I have a lot of problem with the debate that's going around simply that we do not support this site for the military base as being anti-military, anti-veteran. And
good point.
I would like to strongly say that that is not the case. There are alternative sites, there's possibilities. Simply because people oppose that site does not put us in an anti-military, stance. I believe
Bravo.
Probably every single person in this room, supports our military. First point. Second point, the property is 300 acres. If there is no other alternative site, personally, I don't have a problem with 25 acres out of that site. I've spoken with Lee multiple times. I've worked on that property for 30 years. It's a beautiful piece of property. Ideally, I would love to see us own that property, but obviously, financially, that's not a viable option. My feeling as an individual, not reflecting my position as a city council member, but as an individual, my ideal option for that property is a mixed-use property. We need to generate tax revenue that's zoned industrial property. We need to balance that between our need for open space, for industrial use, for residential or a mixed-use property. I'm not exactly sure how we can approach that with Mr. Robinson, but I think we need to be somehow be able to work with him to give him what he needs to be able to generate revenue. Obviously, he's a private person. We need a willing seller. We need somehow to work with him to come up with an agreement that military, anything else, I don't worry about that, to balance what the city needs and what he needs. I would like to see a mixed use for that property of industrial, residential, open space. For people who don't know, we several years ago sold to Melvin Rice, our farm, only 30 acres as opposed to 1/10 of the property of the Lee farm. I don't expect people to do a deal like we did with the city, but I think we need to come up with a program somehow that we can work with him, work with the military, or work with someone else to get a mix of use on that property that benefits everyone. And that's my feeling. But my biggest point is that I don't want to see perpetrated the idea simply because people are against the use of that property for that facility on that particular piece of property, that we're anti-military, that we don't support the reserve unit, that we don't support them, that we don't support our military, and that is totally ridiculous in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. I think I agree with you when I would say everybody in this room is exactly the same way about that. Are there any other ex officio members that wanted to add something? Mr. Rotello?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Earlier, Paul Rotello, 42 Pleasant Street, Danbury, City Council for the 6th Ward. That's the ward that approximately half the property rests on. The other half is on the 5th Ward. Earlier, I joked I would rather be home having a glass of wine on a cold night tonight, but I was actually kidding. I'm actually very...
What kind of wine?
Proud of it. A little, there's fancy German stuff. They all invited to my house after.
Okay, we'll be there.
I'm actually happy to be here tonight. I'm proud to be here. I think this is an auspicious beginning for something that I think we're going to look back on in 25 or 30 years with a lot of pride if we're careful. Danbury has been very good to the Lee family, as it was very good to the Mallory family before them. Our family had to accommodate Danbury in the 1970s. We owned a property on Liberty Street, and during a street realignment, we lost everything we had going down that street, and my grandfather had built most of it in the late 1800s, early 1900s. We wound up in court. It was taken by eminent domain, and we settled for, after 5 or 6 years of a lot of agitation, cents on the dollar. But it was something that had to be done. And when I drive down Liberty Street, I'm actually pleased that it happened that way. I mean, it cleaned up the street, the buildings were old, and, at some point you take a bullet for your community. I'm not suggesting the Lees have to do that, but this idea that because the property is privately owned, we have no influence over the process, I think can be explored and probably analyzed from a different direction. We could, if we wanted to, take this property by eminent domain and spend the next 5 or 10 years in court battling over a fair valuation. I think this figure that has been discussed of 40 to 50 million is probably excessive because the property as zoned is essentially unmarketable right now. Industrial property has gone begging. I was on the zoning commission, for instance, a dozen years ago, and a parcel came up off of Exit 8, which we have showed the Army, or at least told the Army about it. It still hasn't sold. This is probably 1999. And the owners of that property, realizing that they could never build a factory on it, wanted to rezone it to residential. We declined that application because Leahy had some gas tanks next door, and they had to vent them off occasionally when the tanks swelled up, and we felt it was probably an improper place for a residential community. But they told us, look, we cannot sell this property. It's essentially worthless to us as industrial property. So one thing that we can do, instead of writing a big check for $40 or $50 million, which we clearly don't have, is we can essentially call the Lees and the Robinsons to life. We can say, look, we're not going to rezone. Now, just a reminder, the Zoning Commission in Danbury is a separately elected body, and members of the council or the administration cannot influence it, like the school board. We can't tell the Zoning Commission, hey guys, rezone this or redo that. A planning commission, the people are appointed, but they are still a separate legal body under state statute. But the Zoning Commission, we are not even supposed to have conversations with them outside of the public sphere. If there's a matter before them. So this idea, echoing the mayor's comments, that Mr. Robinson would ask us to rezone his property, he can't ask me, he can't ask the mayor. He certainly is entitled to ask the zoning commission. My guess is the zoning commission would probably turn down that application. And if that were to happen, if the zoning application were to be turned down and the property remained industrial, there is absolutely no way that the value would be $40 to $50 million. My guess is closer to 15 or 20. Now, this is where it begins to get interesting. Well, if you can't sell it, what's the value? I mean, you have a figure in mind that you want to get, but you're only going to get that figure if somebody gives it to you. And if you can't build a factory on there, if Roche or Pfizer or one of these R&D medical outfits doesn't want to relocate to Danbury, and you can't put a transfer station there, and a truck stop's not going to go in, it leaves you with decreasing opportunities. And when that happens, you lower the price to squeeze the market a bit. It's not going to get 40 or 50 million. If it is rezoned residential, we're going to have to send kids to school, and I can do a complete 2-hour dissertation on how expensive that is going to be. One of the most amazing things about preserving open space is that it's not just something that you do for the environment, it's also something that you do for the taxpayers. It invariably will cost you more to send kids to school. For instance, in Danbury, there's about 28,500 housing units and about 11,000 kids in school. And if you just do the division, we work out to about 36 to 37 kids per 100 housing units. Now, this includes single-family houses, condominiums, apartments, and whatnot. It's actually a little bit denser with condominiums. But assuming that they build 1,000 condominium units on Lee Farm, and that wouldn't be unusual. Mr. Bertram on Kennedy Park on 7 acres has permits to build almost 600. That's on 7 acres.
13 acres.
13 acres. So it's 583 units on 13 acres. We're looking at 300 acres. Probably half is unbuildable. Maybe 100 to 150 acres of buildable land on Lee Farm. You could easily get 1,000 units up there. And if we had 1,000 units, we could conceivably see 400 to 500 kids going to school there. And that would mean at least one more new school at somewhere between 15 to 25 million. We'd have to build immediately. The state doesn't give you a pass on this. If you have kids that need to be educated, the schools have to be built or they have to be expanded. So just the one school alone, if that were to happen, would probably cost us more than what I think the value of Lee Farm is. We'd have to pay for either one. But it doesn't end there with the school, because then you've got to send these kids to school every year at $11,000 a pop. Do the math. Now, it's true that some of these people will be paying taxes, probably $3,500 per unit. But if you have 2 units paying taxes at $7,000 for the 2, and one child coming from those 2 units, we're looking at about a 50% rate. You realize that at $11,000 a year in taxes, you're behind the 8 ball by about $4,000 per child going to school. Multiply that figure by 500, and you're looking at something in the vicinity of $2 million a year on top of the debt service for the school. So we would have a debt service for David St. Hilaire could jump in here, but if we had a a school for $25 million. I'm not sure what the debt service would be on that, but
Well, they've grown over 20 years, so...
yeah, $1 million a year perhaps.
Well, a little bit over, yeah.
Yeah, and then another $2 million for the kids in school, so we're looking at $3 million. So that's the nut. Can we afford to send 500 kids to school on Lee Farm and spend $3 million a year in perpetuity? It's never going to end. It's not going to end in 25 years or 50 years or 75 years. There will still be kids up there. They'll still be going to school. Or we'd rather simply bite the bullet and buy Lee Farm in total for probably a figure at that level or less would eventually disappear after 25 or 50 years. Our ancestors, our children, our grandchildren would no longer have to service that debt because at some point we pay for it. Recurring costs on a parcel like Lee Farm would probably be comparable to Terry Wild or less, depending what we did with it. If we didn't do anything with it, if it was just for passive recreation, we could probably get a lot of volunteers to maintain it. And I don't see expenditures much north of $50,000 to $75,000 a year just to maintain that property. So it gets a little bit more complicated when we decide we can't afford this. We're going to make a deal with the Robinsons. We're going to set aside some residential units and maybe some industrial and possibly some commercial, because we will eventually have to service all of that. It is true that if the Army comes up there now, we have to service them too, and they're not giving us anything in return. There's ideas around that too. One of the things that we could do if we have the time, and let's just think for a second and then I'll finish up. But let's say the Army decides not to proceed with this. Now the Army's off the table. Now we have to deal directly with the Robinsons and the Lees because there's no immediate threat to the property. One thing that we could do is we could purchase the entire property in total, and then we could lease back some of these sections to facilities like the Army or like an industrial facility or like someone similar to Pfizer or Roche with high-tech, high-paying jobs that wants to come in. We could allow a 40, 50, 75,000 square foot research facility to come in with 100 jobs. We could control the property, lease it back 50, 75, 100 years. We're doing something similar with the Haddad family on Ridgebury Road. It's not unusual for a city to do this. We're actually doing it. And we could recoup some of these costs and satisfy some of the members of the council and some of the members of the public that would like to see some revenue generation. But instead of it being outside the city, it would be internal to the city. It would be our property. And we could do, at that point, what we wanted to do with it. So I think there's a couple of things that we have to think about. One, this price of $40 to $50 million is probably a little more theoretical than real. And if that price were to come down substantially to 25 or 30, or hopefully maybe even 20 to 15, it becomes a lot more possible to take a chunk of this property, if not the entire thing. And I think that's something that needs to be considered. If you'd like to ask me any questions or some details about that, go right ahead, but that's all I have for now. Thank you very much. And again, thank you for coming together with this ad hoc committee, and I hope that we can go forward and at least salvage something out of this situation.
Let me just respond really quickly, just a couple of quick things. Sure. Precisely the reason we ordered an appraisal was to understand the scope of the dollars we're talking about. Not to take Lee's word, but to take our word. So I think it would be important for us to get our paid-for appraisal back to understand the order of magnitude of dollars. I will tell you, don't be so sure that there are other people looking to develop on that site in the zone that it's currently at. I've heard a lot of discussion in the last couple of months about backup offers that have been placed, things like that. So I think we need to just understand that this is understanding that the Robinsons have sat on this property for many years because they won't just give it away. They want a certain return on that investment, and they're willing to wait it out until they get what they want. But having said that, there already is some residential zoning out there. There's some industrial zoning out there, and I don't think there's anything else out there. There's
farm, I think. Farm.
Well, there's farm designation, but it's zoned industrial.
It's a tax.
Yeah, so it's a tax.
Commercial.
There's some. I think there's there's a small commercial.
Oh, gee.
Can I just throw out one other question, just to mull it over? Would the council be amenable to having the Reserve Center potentially exit off Park Avenue, but also purchasing some land as a significant buffer. I'm just throwing it out because that's been thrown out to me by Mr. Robinson.
With the city?
With the, well, you know, with the
And the council?
You mean near Barton's?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, you know, but then it's kind of, I got the development that's sort of inconsistent with the neighborhood, plus I got to pay you money too on top of it. But on the other hand, you are protecting the land for one more, so he did throw that out.
Mr. Taylor, you have your hand up. I'm going to go Mr. Taylor, Mr. Alpern, and then Mr. Chianese. And I'm sure I'm staying just within the council people tonight. So just so you understand, I know that you have your hand up in the back, but I'm staying just with the council people.
I have some very important information
You
you don't want
can
to
give
hear.
it to the committee after the meeting's over. We'll take a look at it.
There's a viable option here.
Okay, great, thank you.
The whole room should hear it.
Great, thank
It's
you.
that important.
Mr. Taylor?
There's 2 points. I adamantly agree on one point with Councilman Rotello, and I adamantly disagree on another point. It's been proven time and time again. I actually have it in my car. I should have brought it in. I've been an open space advocate, land preservation advocate for 25 years. It's been proven over and over and over again. The least impact on taxes for a city is open space and farmland. The worst is actually a negative value for residential value. Without quoting, for every dollar you receive in taxes on residential property, you lose $1.14 or $1.24. Single-family houses, because of the services that Mr. Rotello said. You have to provide education, you have to provide fire protection, you have to provide public utilities, you have to provide a lot of stuff. The worst possible thing for a community is to take a piece of open space land and develop it into residential single-family housing. Industrial is the best return on your money. Commercial is the second best. Single-family residential is the absolute. It's a negative value to the city. For every house you build, you're losing money every single year on that piece of property. That said, he mentioned, taking that property by eminent domain. I am a political, social, physical conservative. I would in no way vote to take that property by eminent domain because I don't think that is not a legitimate public use of that property. Private property, they've owned that property for years. They have the right to develop the highest and best use of that property. That's their right, constitutional right. If they want to work with us, that's fine. If they don't, we don't, as a legislative body, just like the healthcare debate right now, we have no right to demand that property owner or request that property owner to not achieve his value in that property. Even though I would love to see, I would love to see that property, but if that's not his desire, we as a legislative body, we as a community, have no right to ask him to receive less value in his property than he can receive. Thank you.
Understood. Mr. Alpern?
I would respectfully disagree. Otherwise, we wouldn't have zoning. Everybody would want to develop their property to its highest and best use. I think there are two things. One,
Mr. Alpern is the Director of Planning for the city, for those who don't know.
the area south of West Worcester is zoned IL40. It has bothered me for many, many years. The plan of development shows that it should be low-density development. Why? It's very hilly land, has no utilities on it, and as you know, the access off of Worcester is bad. Steep road, curvy. That area, I think, should never be developed industrially or commercially, or for that matter, for multifamily development. It's simply because of the nature of the land. Now that leaves the area between Worcester and Park Avenue. For industrial development along Park Avenue, that I think the case can be made, because there's industrial development along here. There's O&G and there's gardens and so on. But then there's that area between there and Worcester. What do you do with that? It's in the airport approach zone. Not a good place to build houses, especially if they're going to have touch and go, training, and that sort of thing.
Well, the military doesn't do that, though.
No, not the military, the airport. I'm talking about our airport.
I don't want people thinking we're going to fly this.
No.
Similar about our airport.
And I think you suggest if we build houses on top, that would be a problem
Yeah, no,
with airplanes
may I
flying over your
finish? If you're looking, a single family would be tough. So what do you have left? Well, commercial is going to attract an awful lot of traffic, and I couldn't suggest that. Industrial is better, can be better. Less traffic typically, not always, but typically. And then you're left with multifamily, with condos. Condos are very unpopular in Danbury, and I think you run into a lot of opposition in that regard. This is the area it's behind Park Avenue, but between there and Worcester. Those are the kinds of options that you'd be looking at. But definitely the area south of Worcester should not be like industrial. Should not be.
Should not be industrial.
No, it should be very low density housing.
If you're speaking of the property that we're talking about now, where the reserve center would be? Or
They actually, well, the last plan I saw, the 60-some acres, leapfrogged over Worcester into the south, and
It's 18 acres on the south side.
how many?
18.
18. And that, I think, would be terrible. You would have so much earth moving and grading and so on going on. As trees would come down, that would be quite a mess. Now, if you wanted to develop that area for single family, it would be low density. We're talking about 2 acres only. They could come in for cluster development. You don't get a density bonus under that, but it does allow you to work around environmental constraints.
And you have an open space requirement.
And you do. Yeah, anything that's left over is open space. It's the area between Worcester and Park, and I think Park is open to. I wouldn't want to see more strip commercial along Park Avenue. That's a huge traffic problem, and right on the way to the mall, I'm sure it would be very, very appealing. But it's pretty much set right now for industrial development. By industrial development, light industrial development, which includes offices. Doesn't have to be, and certainly not heavy industrial. Nobody's building heavy industrial except the Chinese. So that's an option there. The real question is, what do you do between, let's say, where you come off Frank's Corner, that road, no, it's not a road, it's a trail that goes in there.
Yeah.
That from that area south to Worcester, that's the tough nut. You could try to extend the single family, I think it's RA 20, that along it abuts the northern edge of Worcester. You could try to extend that down a bit. All the way to the traffic light, I don't know, but at least a bit. But then there were still some areas that, I'd have to really study. But those are the kinds of options I think looking at. Return on investment, yes, you can get a decent return on investment. I mean, those houses south of Worcester would be expensive. Just talking about cheap housing. And of course, any industrial land along Park Avenue would be a pretty good market.
To the chair, to Mr. Elker, are you suggesting that the city purchased the property?
No, no.
When you say return on investment, you're referring to Mr. Robinson.
For him, yeah. I mean, there's as you remind me all the time, we don't have a lot of money. There might be some places where we could, help out here and there.
But don't forget that any borrowing requires a vote of the entire city to do that.
Oh,
and
I'm talking within the confines of what's left in our open space bond, which isn't a whole lot.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there may be some opportunity to do
a little. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mr. Cheney's?
Again, Ben Kennedy, again, I'm the 6th Ward councilman as well. Just a question, how long would it take to get that assessment back?
The appraisal was ordered last month.
So ordered early November. Figure about 6 to 8 weeks, depends. The problem with the appraisal is it has to be done in the yellow book format, what they call it, because of potential for state and federal grants that may be out there or other state or federal issues. So it'll be a little longer because of that format. So perhaps by the end of the year we're open.
So that'll be the next step we need to go from this committee, is we need to wait to get that appraisal back. And then once we get that, then we really would have hard numbers as to where we need to move forward with. I think tonight we heard a lot of potential uses for it. I think Dennis, really the plan of conservation at this point will be the Bible to which we need to use to go forward. It calls for, what do you say there, a lot of IL right now? Low density.
The IL is between Worcester and Park. The area south of Worcester is recommended to be low-density residential, or what we call rural residential, 2-acre zoning.
I think we need to keep all our options open, what we need to do. I think the mayor mentioned it before, when they had that EA comment period, a lot of comments came out of what we can use to make the Army Reserve be more welcome here. And one of the proposals was to have access off of Park Avenue. And that may please a lot of people here. It takes a lot of the traffic off West Worcester and put it more on Park Avenue. But we don't know that because the Army's not talking to us yet. And that's what a lot of public just want to hear. We want to give our opinions to make it, see if we can make it work on that piece. They're not allowing us to do that. So a lot of us are in the dark. So of course we're going to say, if you're not going to talk to us, we're not going to want to welcome you here as you would like us to be. But I think at this point we can go round and round. But I think at this point, I think the recommendation of this council to table the meeting or to continue it, waiting upon that the appraisal to come back and then reconvene the meeting, and then we can move forward to see where we need to go, and then we can probably make a more formal offer to the Robbins to move some type of mixture. Maybe we can start from Price Corner and work our way up and see how much we can go.
If I could just chime in there, I think we have to ask a couple of ourselves, and this time some questions about, Ben brings a point about coming in off of Park Avenue. That is listed as an alternate in the Army's choices. It's one of the lower deep alternates, but it's a possibility. But there may be people, and I'm not suggesting everybody hears that way, that may find that completely unacceptable as well. And some people, frankly, want no development up there at all, ever. And that's just not going to, whether I'm here or 10 years from now, there's going to be development there at some point. What I've strived for with Lee over the years was to strike a balance of preservation of open space with sort of recognizing he is a property owner, it's his asset, he has the right to develop his property in the manner which our plan of development calls for. We have not had a lot of success because there's been definitely a lot with his planners, more than him, that attempt to sort of leverage a much higher density than either Dennis and I were remotely comfortable with. But I think getting that appraisal is key to understanding the scope and the magnitude of what we're talking about here. And I think that we at the end of the day we'll need somebody willing to work with us. And Mr. Robinson will probably say, "I'll be happy to sell you this piece or that piece or this by Terrawell. However, I want to get high density condominiums on this site, and there's no deal unless I do it." And then we're going to have to start having a conversation. I think maybe when I talk to the Army, then when I asked them, Mr. Chairman, is do a layout coming off of Park Avenue. Is it possible for them to do a quick rough schematic to see what that would look like versus the layout that they currently have, so that we can really understand what that impact is to the sight lines the quality of life for that side of the city, all those things. Because again, we're kind of flying blind. I'm having a hard time just visualizing the whole site and exactly where everything comes in and out. So I will ask them to do that in our next conversation. But I wouldn't necessarily say they're unwilling to work with us. You know, the Army, you know, for you veterans out there, and I see Paul Valerius and other folks, Donnie Taylor, and myself, you know the DOD just goes to the beat of a different drummer. And they are definitely siloed off, and they don't talk a lot across these division lines in terms of each other. So you really got to pull it out of them, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But we got a chance. So even if we get this located somewhere else, we still have the issue of Lee Farm. Sorry. Sorry.
That's okay. I'm going to go to Mr. Taylor first because he has his hand up prior to you, Mr. Taylor. Then I'm going to go to you, and then we're going to, as most of you are aware, we're going to continue this meeting. We have every intentions of just continuing. And Mr. Valeri, I'll take that information from you, and we will.
Don't go anywhere, Paul.
We'll review it, and then it'll certainly come up at our next meeting. So I'll go to Mr. Taylor for third.
I think a lot of people too focus. They don't realize the extent of 300 acres of property. Every single picture in the paper, every single article has focused on the north side of Worcester Heights property. Said, I've worked on that property, mowed that property for 30 years. There's a significant part on the north side, if you're headed down toward Route 7, it'd be on your left. The south side of the property is a significant.
You showed us that.
Yeah, when I mow that property, you would think you're Vermont. The only thing you can see when I'm working on that piece of property is the light tower for the airport. You would think you're out in the middle of nowhere. There's a significant portion of the property, and that abuts Terrywile. That's the area that I would like to see preserved on the south side of Worcester Heights Road. Even though that's not what's visible and what people see and relate to the open fields. It's an open field. They mow it every year. It's a beautiful piece of property, and it abuts. When I have equipment there, in 20 years, I've walked up over the hill 20 times to move equipment back and forth.
Donnie, how come you never let me? I never got to hear that field.
You raked stones. You didn't.
You kept me on Great Plain Road.
But that's a piece of property people don't see. It's behind where Bartlett's and that beautiful white house that was always Bartlett's. That beautiful piece of property on that side, people totally disregard. And that's the piece I would like to see preserved. As far as Fry's Corner and that side, there's wetlands issues there.
I like Fry's Corner.
There's wetlands there. There's water problems there. But I've always said that's been my feeling, is because you have Barnes, because you have the military museum, because you have ONG. If they would locate on that side, you're not affecting property owners. It's more of an industrial. It's already developed on the Park Avenue side. When people say traffic affects the other side, I can see that too. But if you come off of Route 7, if you come up Worcester Heights going east, all there is industrial property until you get to the road that goes into the Leaf Lawn Covered Park. So most of the traffic, if the military did go there, or if an industrial development did go there, I would assume most of the traffic would come off of the Route 7 I-84 corridor and not come from the Park Avenue, the Worcester Square area. It would come off the highway. But if I had my druthers, first choice, I would love to see the whole place preserved. I've been an advocate of open space, land preservation for 30 years. I don't think it can happen. But if we do have to develop it, protect the homeowners on Worcester Heights, move the development to the Park Avenue side. But with the realization that there are there are wetlands issues there. There's areas I can't mow because I can't drive my tractor through it because it's too wet. So,
Thank you, Mr.
Yep.
Mr. Rotella?
Yeah, thanks. Just to echo Councilman Taylor's comments, so there really are two major aesthetic themes, which I didn't refer to before, or environmental themes at Lee Farm. One are the open meadows. They're very much like the meadow that the city created several years ago at the other end of the runway when we had to take down those trees by a and hydro seed that and some grasslands that are native to New England. So you've got that theme, and that's probably the theme that most people recognize when they're driving up Price Corner, down Park Avenue, up or down the Heights. These beautiful rolling meadows that Councilman Taylor's been knowing for years and years and years, and they're really bucolic and postcard beautiful. We don't have a lot of those meadows in Danbury, and it would behoove us to take them seriously and do whatever we can to preserve them. But there is this hidden, almost primeval part to Lee Farm and Robinson Farm on the other side of Worcester Heights. This would be sort of we'll call it the Goodrich side, the old Perkin-Elmer side, behind Bartlett's. It's the old post road that bumps into Lake Wabeeka, that community, and continues down to Route 7. That road was originally there because Route 7 would flood. This is back in colonial days. And they would take the mountain road. It's mostly granite. And no matter how wet it got in vernal times, in the springtime, and no matter how soggy Route 7 was, which it defaulted set up to the actual real post road, they could still get a wagon off this other one. But it's really hard to farm. It's almost impossible to build on. And it hasn't really been touched in a couple of hundred years. And when you walk in there, it is mind-boggling. I mean, that is... If for the city to lose that parcel, I mean, I would hate to lose the meadow, but I just have to echo Don Taylor's comments. That would be a major loss, unless and until you've actually wandered around in there. And luckily for us, it is contiguous with Terrywell. So it would be a great addition, let's say, to Terrywell Park. You walk out of a beautifully mowed field at Terrywell, and you feel like, not that you're in Vermont, you feel like you might be in Vermont in 1580. It's one of those, you can't believe you're in Danbury, but, your planes are flying over your head, and you can hear the Royal Highway and all that stuff. But it really is aesthetically amazing. I'm sure it was well done. But the mayor had asked us earlier, how the council would feel if there was an entrance to this facility on the Park Avenue side. Right, exactly. And I just want to point out that under the Army's current plans, that side of Lee Farm that we've just been talking about, I guess it's the south side, again, the B.F. Goodrich side, calls for a 10-acre paved parking lot for these military vehicles that will be stored.
No.
580 vehicles, 270 trailers. So regardless of where they situate their entrance to their facility, which has been variously described as like a campus-like a community college facility, regardless of whether the entrance to that is on the Lee Farm Corporate Park driveway or the Park Avenue side, it doesn't alter the fact that they have plans to build this 10-acre vehicle facility on the Worcester Heights side.
No.
So no matter how they get in, whether they get in from Worcester Heights to the main facility or Park Avenue, they still have to access the vehicle paddock behind what is essentially the Bartlett Tree Company.
No.
There's actually a flat field.
No.
Yes, I don't have them in my card. Behind Bartlett, there's a 10-acre field that they want to pave.
Okay,
yeah.
I'm not aware of that.
Yeah, that's what they want to do. It's a flat field behind Bartlett.
18 acres on the south side of Walden Road.
Yeah, and unless they were to move that, Your Honor, to the other side of Worcester Heights, an entrance from Park Avenue really wouldn't make much difference for the vehicle.
I understand.
So that would probably be great for the guys coming and going on Saturday morning, lining up to do their training and whatnot. But the diesel engines that have to get started early in the morning when they're cold and things like that would still be in the same place.
The project's morphed. I mean, there's no question that it's gone from about 12 to 13 acre. Hey, no problem. We can plop that anywhere. It's the footprint is 30 acres. They did look at 60 because of wetlands mitigation on the site, so they only really need 30 acres. But
it's old post road.
It's huge. huge. And a lot of it's the motor transportation company that they brought into it
And
after.
here's where it drops off, right down the hill, right there.
Okay, folks, you know, we've been at this an hour, and I think we've come a good distance. I think that we're all a little bit clearer on where we are and where we're going.
Quick question. Yeah, Mr.
I hadn't seen this map.
Like, I don't know.
It was online,
Maybe
564
The property you're talking, the apartment, three buildings.
You mean for the paved, for the
Yeah,
cars?
and then the
vehicles?
property
Yeah.
behind that.
Behind that.
Mr. Taylor, is that, who owns that? Is that actually owned by the
Brian
property?
Robinson family. It's actually,
Rizzo owns some of it.
My field.
the locals up there refer to that as Robinson's sinkhole. There's a pond back there. It's generally,
Excuse me, folks, Donnie? We're trying to just get through.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah.
so generally it's considered, up in the Worcester Heights area, the old timers. The Lee farm is the open meadow part, the part that we're all familiar with. And the Robinson property is on the other side of the street. The two families that married combined, all owned by the same people essentially, but that's kind of how it breaks down. Robinson on one side, Lee on the other.
Thank you.
So at this time, I'm going to ask for a motion to continue. I appreciate everybody coming tonight, and I look forward to seeing you all again. I really look forward to seeing you all again. And thank you very much for your cooperation here tonight. So at this time,
It'd be my honor to make a motion to continue this committee to a future point where further information provided by Mayor Boughton and the officials.
second. Okay, motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. No further business. Seeing no further business, we'll go for this meeting. Thank you, Mr.
Yeah, we're going to go mine up. As far as mine last, I got a gallon of it.
Thank you, everybody.
That's not.